Some of these critics, these pundits.
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.
They like to play the hard man when they're on it. It's not very pleasant when you're trying to manage a team. All you're looking for is a bit of civility and a bit of decency, but they just miss you like you know, you have nothing to do with the bloody occasion.
I'm not even sure where we left these. This was
it's been a while.
So long ago.
I think you didn't do them while I don't know what happened. Did you bottle it? Is that what happened?
Did I bottle it?
Were you just waiting?
Oh, did I can't remember.
You haven't done it in months.
Oh, yeah, I haven't actually done it once since you were away, actually.
So I just want to bring everybody we have a WhatsApp group where we plan what's coming up next, and Owen's like, I was just chatting to Mossy Quinn about the power rankings there. This is at Croker the last time, and Owen, blissfully unaware because he's at the game, that the RTE cameras have picked up Mossy Quinn in the crowd talking to somebody, laughing, but they've blocked Owen. They wouldn't even acknowledge that what was going on was lobbying on behalf of the Dubs to come down, take a little bit of pressure off them. They cut Owen, or obviously the powers that be had seen the footage and was like, oh, you can't be promoting off the balls Eoin Sheahan, because we know what they're talking about. The only thing that anybody talks to Owen about in Croke Park when he's there is the power rankings. He loves that, by the way. It's he will perhaps kind of sneer and snarl at you if you give him any advice about it, but actually deep down it's his favourite thing in the world.
It's true, yeah, it is true. I kind of went to Croke Park Maria disguised that day, hoping not to be picked up, but obviously some Kerry, Dublin, like some, I don't know what you would call it, nice politicking maybe was going on. But we do have a change in the top of the power rankings. Like we'll cut straight to the chase here. Kerry are the #1 team in the power rankings for the first time since.
Hey! Well, you didn't. No build up.
No build up.
Oh my God.
No build up. Let's just jump straight into the deep end here.
Someone needs to teach you a little bit of finesse, kid.
Okay, let's pull out and go again. Our man at number 8. Galway at 7, Monaghan at 6, Donegal at 5, Tyrone at 4, Mayo at 3, Dublin at 2, Kerry at 1. But did anybody expect anything different other than the change at the top? Like we'd done all these and we'd got to the provincial finals, and Dublin were continuing to win, but winning a narrow margin. Mayo were continuing to win, and then they won the Connacht final in a narrow margin. Tyrone did the same thing to Monaghan. So there was never going to be enough of a boost for any of those teams, I thought. And then Kerry kind of swatted Cork aside in unignorable fashion. So that is why they're in at #1. It doesn't mean that they're going to win the All-Ireland, but I think that if we're being true to these rankings and overreacting to certain moments in the season, which we have always done in these power rankings, I've overreacted massively. I think Cavan and Tipperary have both been top 5 counties in the last 12 months.
Well, look, they were in the All-Ireland semi-final last year.
Exactly. So then I think we have to overreact. And maybe it's not an overreaction to Kerry and what they've done this year, because it's been close to... it's as close to a perfect season as they possibly could have hoped for at this point. It's not always had to do a really good league and a really good Munster Championship. There's usually a bit of playing it down a little bit along the way, or an off day here or there. And other than that first half against Dublin and Thurles, which does give real cause for concern considering it's Dublin, I don't think you can point to too many moments where you're like they were under massive pressure. And
15 minutes into the Munster final, what was the power rankings in your head?
Oh, Kerry were dropping down. I was just my whole
life. Maybe
my whole life is flashing before my eyes at that point. And like the same thing could happen in either. Hopefully they have 2 games to finish.
Isn't that important though? Isn't it important that actually they've had a little bit of a blip in a game or a slow start and they've thought their way through it and they've been able to come, because that's the hallmark of a good team, and it's the hallmark of a side who isn't in any way actually concerned about the scenario that they face, that they stick to their principles, they have that game plan that we've been talking about in hurling with James Gale or Kelly Harrington at the weekend. You know, the first minute and a half, 2 minutes don't go exactly as planned, but you're using that to gather information, and then afterwards you're unleashing that information in a devastating fashion. It's the type of thing that we would have seen, for example, didn't the Dubs go 5-1 down against Tyrone in the All-Ireland final? Was that what the situation in that one was?
18, yeah.
And nobody was in any way, it was like, oh, this is interesting. Could Tyrone keep? No, they can't. Obviously they couldn't keep it up, because, and I'm not saying that this Kerry team are that Dublin team just yet.
No.
But there's brain power, there's game intelligence, there's a clear plan, there's structures, there's, I think, multiple ways of playing. I think that if they need to be super defensive, the side that they were trying to build last season is still there within them if they needed to be.
and they'll probably pull that out if it is going to be a Kerry-Dublin final this year at some point in that game, because to go back to Thurles, they get opened up, and that is the real moment of concern. The Cork situation in the moment was obviously quite concerning because you don't know what's going to happen next. But in hindsight, when you actually watch the game back and maybe look at the way Kerry handled that early setback, I don't think there was any real panic. I don't think there was any real moment of concern. I don't think you can actually say that, whereas the situation in Thurles probably was, because there was, every game against Dublin is really important if you're going to try and take them down. I do think when you talk about that Dublin team of 18, of course, there's no team in the country, I would say, at the moment who are close to that level just yet. But I do think that is the benchmark for everyone, and I think Kerry have used that as the benchmark. And I think, in a way, what we're seeing from Kerry now is a reaction to Dublin. And it's been a reaction to, you can go all the way back to 2013. It's been a reaction to 2015, when in 2013 they got out-fitnessed, in 2015 they got out-tacticked. And everything since then has been an effort to try and get to Dublin's level. But for a lot of those years, they were in transition and they just didn't have the players. Whereas come 2019, it felt, okay, now they have the players, and now they maybe have the game plan to actually win the All-Ireland. It turned out that wasn't the case. The game plan still needed a lot of tweaking, and last year was a complete aberration. But they've come back this year, in just unbelievable shape physically, and they still have the players, and maybe they have the game plan to win the All-Ireland, and maybe they have the mentality. It just feels that Dublin created a beast and Kerry realised, right, we have to try and create a beast as well.
Yeah, I think the greatness of the Dublin team is not in that they've been so far ahead of all of their rivals all the time. It's that they've been able to win tight games or to draw matches where they could potentially have lost those games. And that's what happened it seems in 2019 in retrospect. And I think hopefully at some point in the next couple of years, and potentially this year, we're going to see a Kerry win which will actually retrospectively frank the Dublin team's greatness even more. That, like, I kind of made this case before about if Mayo had won an All-Ireland at some point in the last decade, we will be banging on even more about how great that Dublin team was. In a way, Kilkenny losing the 5 in a row and coming back to win again after that with a very similar team makes us even more happy to talk about the greatness of the individual players that Kilkenny team had. And I think we've probably taken for granted how great some of those Dublin players were, in a way, because they won those matches and we're like, oh, that's all part of the same thing. But they weren't. Like, each of those All-Ireland finals and each of those All-Ireland campaigns are different campaigns with slightly different requisites. And when you're talking about the benchmark for Kerry being that, was it 17 was the team that you used?
Yeah.
So
17, 18.
It's also the benchmark for this Dublin team, and I think you're right to take Dublin off that number one spot right now, because what we've seen is that I think they're bored, and I don't think they're going to be bored by Mayo, and I do expect a better performance, but we haven't seen it yet this year. And when you're power ranking, it's like, who's going to win the game today on the basis of what you think today, right? That doesn't mean that Kerry are suddenly a better team than Dublin, but if Kerry played Dublin today, I'd be tipping Kerry slightly. And
I think the bookmakers have reflected that as well. They have been favourites since the Cork game. I think after that Cork game they moved to favourites, and you can kind of see why. And again, it's not necessarily saying that they're definitely going to win the All-Ireland, because I don't think that's the case, because there's just one bit that we're still guessing, and that is getting over the line, and we've seen it with that great Mayo team, that they just didn't have that bit of getting over the line, and they had all the other ingredients. They had great conditioning, they had great players, great coaching, and they just didn't have that final bit. And you can't guess that final bit. You just don't know what's going to happen until a team actually does it. And I don't know, maybe last year is an indicator that maybe Kerry still have to work on that, and maybe the same thing has to go for not getting over the line in the drawn game in 19. But it does seem that there's something different about Kerry this year in how they've ruthlessly put aside a couple of good teams that they've come up against. So the guess is that they do have it in the locker to get over the line, and they do have it in them to beat Dublin. Now, there are two reasons why I'd be a little bit concerned, just in general. The first one is that there is pressure on this season as a result of what I just said, that you are now making a case that this is the best team in the country. If Mayo had Cillian O'Connor, I think there'd be a lot of people maybe tipping them this weekend. And I think when it comes to Kerry and Mayo, there is a pressure on that situation, that if Dublin are bored and they're not going to actually get to their level at some point this year, then there is a pressure on the chasing pack to actually capitalise on that. And then second of all, there is the point that you just made a moment ago about the sting in the tail of Kilkenny. This Dublin team, if they lose in All-Ireland, they will come back and they could win a few more. So if you don't take the opportunity to actually beat them when they're vulnerable this year, who knows what the X in a row will actually get to. So I think this year is so important, and that is your one concern. Does that feed into a negative type of pressure?
For who?
For Kerry and Mayo.
Right.
For the chasing pack.
Well, I mean, it shouldn't, right? Like, I get the point you're making. There's a now or never feel off this, because who knows what reconstituted team will come out next year. You know, who knows what the ceiling for Paddy Small is. Who knows if Boulder gets back in the team. Who knows if any of the lads who are taking some time off come back for a late career 2 or 3 in a row, just to add in some extra time. Who knows, right? And like Fenton, Kilkenny, Costello, still young men, right? But they've all looked human this year at various stages. So, and James McCarthy's obviously not getting any younger. It has a bit of a bang of now or never for me, and I think that should be the type of thing that like galvanises a young side like this Kerry team. It's not like it's a Kerry team who are festooned with All-Ireland winners. There's some there who know what it's like. How many of them? 2, 3, 4?
About 4, I think. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
So there are some of them there who are kind of like, oh, this is last chance saloon for us. But the rest of them are like, this is our day, this is our moment, this is the, you know, all those stuff that retrospectively teams go, oh yeah, we really felt that this was, it was going to be our moment. And with Gaelic football really needs Kerry and Mayo to be at the same level as Dublin, because who knows what new structure we're going to have next year. There's a strong possibility that everybody goes, oh, we like the league, it's really good football. If we condense it and make it a little bit later in the year and keep a fairly similar championship structure, there's a good chance that this is what the future is. I don't know. Like there's still an opportunity for the status quo to remain, and you wouldn't bank against that. So I don't know. For me, I think it's a brave moment for you, Eoin. I realise that you'll never be welcome home again because you made Kerry number 1 in the power rankings. Yeah, it's true. I've been warned against this moment, but I've made enough nonsense arguments based on form in the past that I just have to go with form on this level. Just like on that point that you make there, is the best thing, and again this will be something that will certainly lead me to being disowned even further, is the best thing for the championship in general and for inter-county football that Mayo actually win the All-Ireland this year? Because what you have then is a Dublin team who are obviously one of the greatest of all time and still are, and a Kerry team who have some of the best young talent of all time, then chasing the All-Ireland champions who would be Mayo next year. You'd almost have like a Three Kings scenario where you're... With Cillian O'Connor to come back.
With Cillian O'Connor to come back.
Yeah, I mean, it would be the best thing that could possibly happen to Gaelic football as a sport for neutrals if Mayo won. Now, it would ruin all that Mayo crying narratives and all the memes, and you know, not
and
great.
They would be unbelievably insufferable. Let's not forget. But
it would not be great.
Yeah, but you know, who wouldn't be after such a long period of time? But for football, I think it might actually be the best outcome. If we were previewing next year, I think there would be a lot of. Maybe we'd be tapping too much into the history of Mayo, but it just feels that they were always a county that can be beaten by anybody. Like we saw, even go back to Newbridge and Nowhere, that was an excellent Mayo team who were knocked off by Kildare. If that was the All-Ireland champions with a target on their back, I think that could make next year with a new potential format unbelievably exciting. But I'm sure there's a lot of people who just don't want to see that happen. And like Dublin will be doing it. Like I would still be tipping Dublin this weekend, and maybe this is Tyrone in 17 again, where it's a semi-final that we're building up to as some sort of massive moment for this Dubs team, and it just doesn't happen because they're so much better, and they actually the real top quality Dubs are still in there somewhere, and maybe we see that this weekend. But there is definitely a growing sense that Mayo could do something special. Doesn't
all of things that have gone wrong for Dublin this year have to start going right? Are we at that level? Sorry, let me rephrase that. Dublin are below par at the moment, it seems. How close to par do they need to get, and how much of an improvement is that for them to win the All-Ireland from this point?
I think for this weekend, like they can be a little bit off last year's level and still win. But the reason why I'm giving Mayo a chance is that I think that they're actually a bit more than a little bit off last year's level. And I think a lot of people have seen that as well. Like
isn't there a scenario, though, where Mayo also kick 6 balls into the goalkeeper's hands?
Yeah, absolutely. that can definitely happen. And when you don't have your talismanic forward there, that can absolutely happen. The one concern I would have for Mayo, it's actually on the Dublin side. So what we've seen, your boredom point is interesting because Dublin have strangulated Meath and Kildare for large swathes of the game over the last 2 games, where they have conserved energy to a point, and that they have realised that a game is done after 60-something minutes and just pass the ball around. They literally have not needed to go hell for leather for full 70 to 80 minutes in a game just yet. And they definitely have that. Like, I don't think there's any case we made that Dublin aren't as fit as they used to be. They can definitely get to that higher gear fitness-wise. And I just think that if they turn it on that level, does everything else then just click into gear? And I fear it might. And I fear that Mayo actually could be on the receiving end of a bit of a backlash on that front. But it just comes back to this idea, what's motivating them to not have a massive 15-point lead, for example, or a 20-point lead going into that passing the ball around phase at the end of a game during the Leinster Championship? And I can't find an answer to that question.
Well, maybe it's personnel, missing John Small, missing Merchant, and those players are now back, that the team begins to feel a lot like an All-Ireland winning team. If this team started at the weekend but had a bench of Mannion and a few others, obviously McCaffrey was never really a bench player, but say you had Mannion and McCaffrey on the bench this weekend, we wouldn't be talking like this at all.
No.
Like, it's the significance of those players. Or if Cluxton was playing, it's unlikely we would be talking about all this stuff. So
yeah,
it feels like it's on a knife edge for the first time in a long time.
It does. Now, like, when you look through the papers this morning, like Philly McMahon's done an interview saying that all of us must put our foot to the floor, and like the comments that he's coming out with this week kind of are reminiscent of Dublin under Jim Gavin a little bit. Like, I mean, the Philly story last week was that he wasn't sure if he'd be around or not due to his involvement with Bowes. So, like, that was kind of a strange. This isn't a very Dubs story. Whereas you're looking at his comments this morning, and it's kind of a little bit of fighting talk, or we're not paying attention to the noise, and you're like, those ring a bell from the great Dublin team of the last few years, and that attitude is still in the camp without question.
Yeah, except you say these things, and then 3 years later you're like, actually we'd lost it at that point. It had gone a little bit because of all the players who'd gone, and the new management team came in and they were finding their feet and they were still building their own culture, as opposed to just inheriting the culture. Like, the bit of them inheriting the culture is over, and it seems that we're in that now. This is Desi and his management team's group, and it's going to be them over the next couple of years. And it's not automatic that it's the same as previous, and it shouldn't be the same as previous, because that was Jim Gavin and his crew's way of doing business, and it's unsustainable to take somebody else's and try and copy it. So we're in that transition period, and the Dubs are managing a transition period with an All-Ireland already in the back pocket.
Yeah, and like the one other thing I'd say, in terms of if you're looking for reasons to be hopeful for Dublin over these next 2 games, there has been this narrative brought up from the dead again over the last couple of weeks about the Dubs potentially being boring. And I get why it's said. I understand why people say that, given how some of the games are closed out, but it's not necessarily their fault as such. The Dubs are incredibly boring to watch when they're playing Leinster football, and when they are passing the ball around, and when they've killed games, because the contest as an unknown spectacle is dead and is by definition boring. I don't know when Dublin have been in a tight game, when they've been right up against it, and the game hasn't been
one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, exactly. Not just not boring, incredible.
Yeah. The Mayo games are like literally some of the best examples of why Gaelic football is one of the best sports in the world when it's played properly.
Exactly.
And we've come through this period of dour defensive football, and we've come through it because the brainpower and the talent of Dublin has shown that athleticism and a desire to attack intelligently produces brilliant contests.
So my point then is that we will see a completely different Dublin if they are pushed all the way at the weekend. In some people's eyes, they will have gone from being boring to being 50% of one of the greatest games of all time if they're pushed, because chances are that's what it'll be. So that's an entirely different outlook on a team, and an entirely different approach to the game potentially as well. And if you're a Dublin fan, I would definitely be clinging to that.
Yeah. So look, I think there's a potential that this Mayo team, we're overrating where this Mayo team are on the basis of what they've come through so far this year, and that actually Galway played well for 15 minutes, and Galway's identity is not set, and Galway's best player got injured in an off-the-ball incident and had no real influence on the game after that. And like, fair play to Mayo, played brilliantly at the start of that second half. It was a blitz, but it was a blitz It wasn't their performance level so far in the championship over a number of years. And are they capable of doing that for the 80, 82 minutes or however long this game is going to last against a Dublin side? Or are they only capable yet because they're still finding their form, a bit like the Cork hurlers, that this is although you have some old players there, that it's still a new team and it's a young team and their identity is still being forged? I don't know the answer to that, and I guess we're going to find that out this weekend. But you'd be worried. If I was a Mayo fan, I'd be very worried about Dublin just being too street smart for them this weekend.
Yeah, and like that could be a situation where it's almost like last year's All-Ireland final, which, what was it? Was it 5 points in the end? Which it just seems like a far smaller margin than the game really was. You could see a similar type of game actually breaking out this weekend. And yeah, like I do think that there is still, like, Mayo didn't necessarily reach their ceiling in some of those great games against Dublin. It might have seemed that they did, but like, one of the constant criticisms of Mayo was how come they weren't seeing a great version of Aidan O'Shea in any of those games against Dublin. He's still there. He's of greater importance now that Cillian O'Connor's not there. And if he all of a sudden has his best day out against Dublin, which would be an 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10 even, then that's an additional element that they didn't have even during their great era when they were pushing the best Dublin team of all time to replays. So I think there are other things that you can point to and say Mayo have another gear to go to as well. But of course, the obvious thing is that Dublin are actually the ones that have been coasting along and are going to knock it up a couple of notches.
Do Kerry need a game against Tyrone?
Yeah, I think so. I think that this is generally the bye for Kerry would be bad. First of all, if they win the All-Ireland, because people like you will say it was a soft All-Ireland for all time. But second of all, I think that they will be soft themselves going into an All-Ireland, even though their A versus B games will undoubtedly be incredible at the moment, because I think their squad depth is outrageous. But I think they need a game. I think that beating Tyrone in Croke Park is something that, yes, they've done twice over the last few years, but it's something you can never get enough of. They are the Ulster champions. They've seen off some exceptional teams, and I don't think there's anything you can get in training that will replicate that match. And if they can't, my theory is that if they can't beat Tyrone, they just don't deserve to be up against the Mayo or Dublin in the final. I think that they lose that game fair and square, and no matter how many weeks it's delayed, I don't think anybody can have any complaints.
No, finally we're in a scenario where you can say that about these games, where actually they should be competitive. And so the power rankings, just because we very quickly we went over these again. Number 8,
Armagh.
Number 7,
Galway.
Number 6,
Monaghan.
Number 5,
Donegal.
Number 4,
Tyrone.
Number 3,
Mayo.
Number 2,
Dublin.
Number 1,
Kerry.
How long has it been?
I don't know.
Ever,
I think, since we've been doing these. But
in the history of the power rankings, this has never happened. You're a bit blasé about this.
This has never happened. I guess I'm not the only person saying this. You see, as I said, the bookmakers are all going with Kerry as their number one. Kieran Whelan had Kerry as his number one in his power rankings last Friday in the Herald and the Independent.
Is your beef with Kieran Whelan over?
Oh, it's just respect, and respect only, myself and Kieran Whelan. I'm sure he'll be, I guess, setting the tone ahead of a Kerry Dublin final, were that to be the final in a few weeks' time, and saying that Kerry are the best team in the country.
Wouldn't it be a bit ridiculous if Dublin were going for 7 in a row and Kerry were the favourites? That would be like the Kerry would have been out-yerred in that scenario.
Well, that's Dublin are going for a 7 in a row, and they're not All-Ireland favourites. Maybe it's already happened. Maybe Dublin have
checkers and chess.
Got in rent free to all of Kerry's heads, and the whole transfer of Yerism has effectively been completed.